The chamber was vast and circular, cold metal beneath everything. Glowing pods lined the walls, each one holding a representative from a different conquered world. They sat quietly, their faces showing no emotion. They had learned long ago not to show feelings in front of the warlord. At the center of the chamber, on a raised platform, stood the warlord of the Xylos Empire. He was massive, twice the size of any other creature in the room. His body was covered in thick, hard armor like an insect. His many eyes glowed red as he looked around at the assembled representatives. He had conquered every species in this room. They were his now. His property. Holographic star maps floated in the air above him, showing the vast reach of the Xylos Empire. Systems and planets glowed blue, marking territory won through 1,000 cycles of war. The warlord pointed a sharp claw at one small, blue planet on the edge of the map. "This," the warlord said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "is our next target. The inhabitants call it Earth." The representatives leaned forward in their pods, curious. Many had never seen this planet before. The warlord waved a claw and new images appeared. Scans of the planet. Cities. Oceans. Clouds. Then closer images of the creatures who lived there. "Observe," the warlord said. "Primitive technology. They have not even mastered simple space travel beyond their own moon. Their weapons are weak. Their ships are slow." More images appeared. Humans walking in crowds. Humans driving vehicles. Humans sitting in homes, watching glowing boxes. The warlord made a sound like grinding metal. It was his way of laughing. "Look at them," he continued. "They waste their time on strange activities. They paint pictures on flat surfaces. They make noises with instruments and call it music. They tell each other stories about things that are not real." The images showed humans at concerts, hands in the air. Humans in museums, looking at paintings. Humans in theaters, watching actors on stages. "Even worse," the warlord said, "they fight each other constantly. They divide themselves into groups based on lines drawn on maps. They have different leaders who disagree about everything. They cannot even unite their own small planet." He pointed to maps showing human nations. Different colors for different countries. Red for one group. Blue for another. Green for another. 60 days ago, one group of humans was attacking another group with explosives, the warlord said. Today, they trade goods with each other. Tomorrow, they may fight again. There is no logic. No order. They are chaotic and irrational. The representatives murmured among themselves. This did sound like a weak species. Easy to conquer. The warlord raised his claw and the room fell silent. "My tactical officers have analyzed everything," he said. "Their military forces are divided. Their leaders will not agree on a united defense. Their technology is centuries behind our own. I predict complete subjugation in 2 standard weeks." He looked around the room, his many eyes glowing. "Are there any questions?" The representatives stayed silent. They knew better than to question the warlord. The last one who asked too many questions was no longer in his pod. But then, from the darkest corner of the chamber, a small figure moved. It was a reticulan, one of the first species the Xylos had conquered many cycles ago. He was small and hunched, with large black eyes and thin gray skin. He sat in the shadows, away from the others. No one ever noticed him. No one ever spoke to him. But now, his trembling hand rose slowly into the air. The warlord's eyes all turned toward him. The chamber became deathly quiet. "Warlord," the small creature whispered, his voice shaking. "I must speak." The representatives stared. No one spoke to the warlord like that. No one interrupted his announcements. This small creature was either very brave or very foolish. The warlord took a heavy step forward. The metal floor shook beneath his weight. "You may speak," the warlord said slowly. "But choose your words carefully, little one." The small reticulan lowered his hand. He looked around at the other representatives, then back at the warlord. His large black eyes seemed to hold secrets. "Warlord," he said quietly, "I know this planet. My people observed it long ago, before your empire found us. We watched them for many years." The warlord tilted his massive head. "And?" The small creature took a breath. "There is something you do not understand about humans," he said. "Something our scans could never show you." The representatives leaned forward. The warlord's eyes narrowed. "Explain," the warlord commanded. The small reticulan looked at the holographic image of Earth, still floating in the air. "Blue and green and beautiful. When humans face a common enemy," he said softly, "they do not remain divided. They do not continue fighting each other. Something changes inside them. They forget their differences. They remember they are human first, and everything else second. The warlord made his grinding laugh again. Sentiment, he said. Irrational emotion. Proof of weakness. The small creature shook his head slowly. No, warlord, he said. It is proof of something else. Something you have never faced before. He looked up at the massive insectoid warrior. When you threaten them, he whispered, they do not just fight to survive. They fight for each other. They do things that make no logical sense. They sacrifice themselves for strangers. They risk everything for people they have never met. The chamber was completely silent. And when that happens, the small reticulan continued, their technology improves rapidly. Their minds work faster. Their creativity becomes a weapon. They build things in days that should take years. They adapt in hours when other species need cycles. The warlord stared at him. You speak as if you have seen this. The small creature looked down at his trembling hands. My people sent a small observation team to Earth once, he said quietly. Long ago. They never came back. But before they went silent, they sent one final message. He paused. What did it say? The warlord demanded. The small reticulan looked up, his black eyes meeting the warlord's many red ones. It said, do not make them angry. The warlord was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, loud and harsh, the sound echoing through the chamber. Foolish superstition, he said. The invasion begins at dawn. He turned away from the small creature, dismissing him. But as the representatives filed out of the chamber, the small reticulan stayed in his corner, watching the holographic image of Earth still floating in the air. You will learn, he whispered to himself. We all learned. But by then, it was too late. The chamber had gone quiet after the small reticulan spoke. The other representatives looked at him with a mix of pity and fear. Pity because he was foolish enough to speak. Fear because they might get in trouble just for being near him. The warlord had stopped laughing. He stood very still, his many eyes fixed on the small creature. You claim to know these humans, the warlord said slowly. Show me. The small reticulan nodded. His name was Kalen. He had served the Xylos Empire for many cycles, ever since his own people were conquered. He sat in shadows and never caused trouble. Until today. Kalen pressed a small device on his wrist. The holographic star maps faded away. New images appeared in the air. Grainy footage. Old. Human-made. This was recorded many years ago, Kalen said quietly. My people observed Earth from a distance. We did not interfere. We only watched. The first image showed a tall building. Flames were coming out of the windows. Black smoke rose into the sky. Humans stood on the ground below, looking up. Many were crying. Then a single human ran toward the building. Not away from the fire. Toward it. The warlord tilted his head. Why does he do this? Is he trying to escape? Kalen shook his head. Watch. The human disappeared into the burning building. Smoke covered everything. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The crowd waited. Then the human came back out. He was carrying another human over his shoulder. A stranger. Someone he did not know. His own clothes were burning. His skin was black from smoke. He put the stranger on the ground and went back inside. The warlord stared at the image. He goes again. Into the fire. Yes, Kalen said. The footage showed the human going in and out 3 times. He saved 3 strangers. On the 4th time, he did not come out. The crowd on the ground screamed. Some tried to run in after him. Others held them back. The building collapsed. The warlord was silent. That is illogical, he finally said. He traded his life for strangers. There is no benefit to his species. No genetic gain. No resource acquisition. It is wasteful. Kalen nodded. Yes, it is illogical. But humans do this all the time. The next image appeared. A great flood. Water covered an entire town. Houses were underwater. Humans stood on high ground, looking at the destruction. Then they formed a line. Hundreds of humans. Then thousands. They stood shoulder to shoulder, passing sandbags from one pair of hands to the next. Old humans. Young humans. Strong humans. Weak humans. They worked together for hours. The water did not win that day. The warlord watched in confusion. These are not soldiers. These are not organized. They have no leader giving orders. No, Kalen agreed. They simply decided to help. Together. The warlord made a sound of disapproval. Emotion. Chaos. This is not how empires are built. No, Kalen said softly. But this is how humans survive. The final image appeared. It was different from the others. A large metal object sat on a flat, rocky ground. The ground was gray and dusty. Above it, the sky was black. The warlord leaned forward. "Where is this? What planet?" "No planet," Kalen said. "It is Earth's moon. A dead rock with no air and no water." The image showed a human in a white suit climbing down from the metal object. He moved slowly, awkwardly. He stepped onto the dusty ground and left a footprint. Another human joined him. They planted a flag. They jumped around in the low gravity. They collected rocks. The warlord stared. They traveled to another world. With this primitive technology. "Yes," Kalen said. "And do you know why they did it?" The warlord waited. "Because their leader told them to," Kalen said. "He said they would do it not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And the entire species worked together to make it happen. Scientists, engineers, factory workers, teachers, millions of humans, all focused on one goal." The footage ended. The chamber was silent again. Kalen turned to face the warlord directly. "Do you see now?" he asked. "When humans face a crisis, they do not fall apart. They come together. They become stronger. They achieve things that should be impossible. A lone human runs into fire. Thousands become a wall against water. Millions reach for the stars." He paused. "They achieve more when united by a crisis, not less." The warlord was quiet for a long moment. His many eyes blinked slowly. Then he laughed. It was loud and harsh and filled the entire chamber. "Sentiment," the warlord roared. "Irrational self-sacrifice. This is not strength. This is weakness. A species that wastes its members on emotion cannot stand against the Xylos Empire." He turned to his officers. "The invasion fleet departs immediately. 2 weeks, and this blue planet will be ours." Kalen lowered his head. He did not speak again. He knew it was useless. The other representatives filed out of the chamber. Some looked back at Kalen with pity. Others looked away. Soon, only Kalen remained in the dark corner. The holographic images were gone. The star maps were gone. The chamber was empty and cold. Kalen looked at the spot where Earth's image had floated just minutes ago. He thought about the firefighter who ran into the burning building. He thought about the thousands who formed a human chain. He thought about the 2 humans jumping on the moon. He thought about his own people, conquered so long ago. They had never fought like that. They had surrendered quickly, hoping for mercy. There had been no mercy. But the humans would be different. Kalen knew this with certainty. He looked down at his trembling hands and whispered to himself. "You will learn, warlord. We all learned. But by the time you understand, your empire will be ashes." The invasion began exactly as the warlord had planned. Thousands of Xylos ships dropped out of hyperspace above Earth. They filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects, blocking out the sun over entire continents. The largest ships stayed in orbit. The smaller ones descended into the atmosphere. On the ground, humans looked up and saw death coming. The Xylos fleet moved with perfect precision. They had done this 100 times before. Conquered 100 worlds. They knew exactly how it worked. First, they jammed all communications. Every phone, every radio, every satellite link went dead. Humans could no longer talk to each other across cities or countries. They were alone. Second, they destroyed the defense networks. Human fighter jets rose to meet them, small and slow compared to Xylos warships. Lasers from the alien ships cut through them like hot blades through ice. The jets exploded one after another. Their pilots never had a chance. Third, they targeted the cities. Not to destroy them completely. Just to show power. Lasers struck major buildings. Bridges collapsed. Power stations exploded. One by one, the great cities of Earth went dark. From his command ship in high orbit, the warlord watched everything on a massive holographic display. He saw the lights going out across the planet. He saw his ships moving unopposed through the skies. He made his grinding laugh sound. 2 weeks, he said to his officers. I said 2 weeks. At this rate, we will be done in 3 days. His officers nodded and made sounds of agreement. They had learned to always agree with the warlord. On the display, the warlord could see the human military forces. They were scattered everywhere. Small groups here and there. No organization. No coordination. Just chaos and panic. Exactly as expected. Then something changed. The warlord's tactical officer, a creature with 4 arms and too many eyes, suddenly leaned closer to his screen. "Warlord," he said, "there is something strange." The warlord turned. What is it? The tactical officer pointed at the display. Look at the human military movements. The warlord looked. At first, he saw nothing unusual. The human forces were still scattered. But then he noticed something. They were moving. Not running away. Not hiding. They were moving toward each other. Small groups from the north were moving south. Small groups from the south were moving north. Groups from the east and west were moving inward. They are converging, the tactical officer said. They are not fleeing. They are gathering. The warlord frowned. Way. To make a last stand somewhere. The tactical officer worked his controls. The display shifted, trying to predict where the humans were going. But there was no single destination. Every human force was moving toward the nearest other human force. Like drops of water coming together to form a larger drop. And then those larger drops were moving toward even larger drops. It makes no sense, the tactical officer said. They have no communications. They cannot talk to each other. How do they know where to go? The warlord said nothing. He just watched. On the display, something else was happening too. The colored lines that showed human nations were starting to fade. The borders between countries were disappearing from the map. The tactical officer worked frantically at his controls. I am trying to maintain the nation-state divisions, he said. But the computer cannot track them anymore. The human forces are not identifying as separate countries. A single word appeared on the display where the many nation names used to be. Human. The warlord stared at it. His many eyes blinked. What does this mean? He demanded. No one had an answer. Then the planet went dark. Not just the cities this time. Everything. Every light. Every power source. Every generator. Every battery. All at once. The entire planet below them became a black ball floating in space. The warlord's ship sensors went wild. They could detect the power sources. They could see that the electricity still existed. It was still there, flowing through wires and cables. But someone had turned it all off. Deliberately. Simultaneously. Across the entire planet. That is impossible, the tactical officer whispered. There is no central control. No single switch. Different countries have different systems. Different grids. Different leaders. They cannot all agree to do the same thing at the same time. The warlord opened his mouth to speak. But before he could say anything, every communication channel on his ship was flooded with a new signal. It was not a military code. It was not a sophisticated hack. It was simple and crude and broken. A human voice. Speaking in badly translated Xylo's words. Get off our planet. The message repeated. Over and over. On every frequency. Get off our planet. Get off our planet. Get off our planet. The warlord looked at his officers. His officers looked at each other. Below them, the dark planet waited. Somewhere down there, 7 billion humans were doing something that should have been impossible. They had turned off their own power. They had erased their own borders. They had found a way to speak with one voice despite having no voice at all. And they were not asking. They were telling. The warlord thought about the small reticulan named Kalen. He thought about the firefighter running into the burning building. He thought about the thousands forming a human chain against the flood. For the first time in 1,000 cycles of conquest, the warlord felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. The warlord expected a fight. He did not expect a war. From his command ship, he watched in growing confusion as the days passed. His forces controlled the skies. His weapons were superior. His soldiers were trained killers. But the humans refused to lose. They did not fight like a defeated army. They fought like a single, cornered organism. Every human on the planet seemed to know exactly what every other human was doing. Without phones, without radios, without any communication the Xylos could detect. They just knew. On the ground, the war looked nothing like the warlord had planned. A Xylos patrol moved through an empty city street. The buildings were dark. The roads were silent. Nothing moved. Then suddenly, windows opened on both sides of the street. Hundreds of homemade bombs rained down. The patrol never had a chance to fire back. By the time reinforcements arrived, the humans were gone. Melted back into the shadows. In a forest far from any city, a Xylos supply convoy rolled through the trees. The road was narrow, surrounded by thick woods. Halfway through, the trees on both sides exploded. Giant logs, sharpened at the ends, swung down from ropes tied high in the branches. They crashed through the alien vehicles like spears. The humans who set the trap watched from hiding, then disappeared into the forest. The warlord's tactical officers brought him reports every hour. The reports made no sense. Phase 1, one officer reported. Cyber warfare. The warlord looked at his screens. He saw human hackers working together. People who had once spied on each other for different countries now shared information freely. They had found ways into the Xylos systems. Not through the main networks, which were well protected. Through the small things. The supply systems. The logistics computers. The things the Xylos never thought anyone would attack. We are losing supply ships, the officer said. They are redirecting our own weapons shipments to empty space. They are sending false orders that send our patrols into traps. They are turning our own technology against us. The warlord said nothing. Phase 2, another officer reported. Physical warfare. New images appeared. Humans in small workshops. They had machines called 3D printers. The machines could make almost anything from plastic and metal. The humans were making weapons. Simple weapons. Untraceable weapons. Weapons that looked like toys or tools until they were used. Other images showed humans using the land itself. They knew every cave, every tunnel, every hidden path. They had lived on this planet for thousands of years. They knew where to hide. They knew where to ambush. They turned cities into traps and forests into graves. Our ground forces cannot hold territory, the officer said. Every time they stop moving, the humans attack. Every time they try to rest, the humans attack. They never stop. They never sleep. They are everywhere and nowhere. The warlord's many eyes blinked slowly. Phase 3, a third officer whispered. This officer sounded different. Scared. What is Phase 3? The warlord demanded. The officer played a recording. It was a broadcast. The humans were sending it on all frequencies. Every Xylos ship could receive it. Every conquered species on every ship could see it. The broadcast showed faces. Faces of the representatives who sat in the warlord's council. The conquered ones. The ones from species the Xylos had crushed long ago. A human voice spoke in simple words. We know who you are, the voice said. We know you were free once. We know the Xylos took your worlds and made you slaves. We know you sit in their council and pretend to agree with them because you are afraid. The faces on the screen looked sad. Ashamed. We are not afraid, the human voice continued. We will never be afraid. Join us. Turn on your masters. Remember what it was like to be free. The broadcast ended. The warlord stared at the blank screen. This is nothing, he said. Psychological tricks. The conquered species will never dash. Alarms began to scream. On the tactical display, the warlord saw something impossible. One of his own ships, a warship crewed by a conquered species called the Vol, had stopped moving. It hung in space, silent. Then it fired on the ship next to it. The other ship exploded. More alarms. More ships going silent. More ships firing on each other. The conquered species were turning. All of them. At once. The warlord's command ship shook as something hit it. Not a human weapon. A Xylos weapon, fired by a ship that was no longer loyal. Warlord, his tactical officer screamed. The fleet is collapsing. We cannot control them. They are all turning against us. The warlord looked at his display. His invincible fleet, built over 1,000 cycles of conquest, was falling apart. Ships fired on ships. Escape pods launched into the void. The conquered species were free now, and they wanted blood. But the worst was yet to come. A new blip appeared on the display. Small. Slow. Primitive. A human ship was coming up from the planet. It was a terrible thing to look at. The humans had taken an old space shuttle and attached pieces of crashed Xylos ships to it. Welded together. Patched with scrap. Wires hanging loose. It looked like a child's art project more than a spacecraft. It looked like something a desperate species would build when they had nothing else. It flew straight toward the warlord's flagship. The warlord's weapons targeted it. But no one fired. The gunners on the flagship were Vol. The same species that had just turned on their masters. They looked at the small, ugly human ship approaching. They looked at each other. They did not fire. The human ship docked with the flagship. Metal scraped against metal. Air seals connected. Somewhere in the ship, a hatch opened. The warlord stood frozen on his platform. His many eyes stared at the door. Boots echoed in the corridor beyond. Human boots. Coming closer. The door opened. A human stood there. A woman. Medium height. Brown hair. Ordinary clothes under a simple space suit. She carried no weapon. She looked around the chamber. Looked at the holographic displays showing the wreck of the Xylo's fleet. Looked at the terrified officers. Looked at the warlord. "Hello," she said calmly. "We need to talk." The human woman stood in the doorway for a long moment. She looked around the chamber slowly, taking in everything. The holographic displays showing the destroyed fleet. The terrified officers pressed against the walls. The massive warlord frozen on his platform. Then she stepped inside. Behind her, more humans entered. Not soldiers with weapons. Just people. A man in glasses who looked like he had spent his life in a laboratory. A young woman with paint on her hands. An older woman with kind eyes who looked like she had spent decades in a classroom. And a soldier in uniform, the woman who had spoken first. They walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. The warlord stared at them. These small, soft creatures who had just destroyed his empire. "You came to kill me," he said. His voice was flat. No emotion. "Do it quickly." The human woman shook her head. Her name was Eva. She had been a fighter pilot when the invasion began. Now she was something else. Something the galaxy had never seen before. "We did not come to kill you," she said. The warlord's many eyes blinked in confusion. "Then why are you here?" Eva reached into her suit and pulled out a small tablet. It was simple. Ordinary. The kind of device human children used for school. She held it out to him. The warlord did not move. He did not understand. "What is this?" he asked. "Everything," Eva said. She placed the tablet on a nearby surface and activated it. Images began to appear. Not weapons. Not wars. Not technology. Paintings. Old paintings from thousands of years ago, drawn on cave walls. New paintings from museums. Paintings of happy things and sad things and things that made no sense at all. Music began to play. Soft at first, then louder. Different kinds of music from different times and different places. Music that made you want to dance. Music that made you want to cry. Music that told stories without using any words. Poems appeared on the screen. Words arranged in ways that were not logical but felt true somehow. Poems about love and loss and hope and fear. Books flashed by. Millions of books. Stories about everything. Stories about heroes and villains. Stories about ordinary people doing ordinary things. Stories about impossible things that existed only in imagination. The warlord watched. He did not understand. "This is our history," Eva said quietly. "Our art. Our music. Our stories. Our failures. Our dreams. Everything we are." The warlord looked at her. "You show me this now. After you have destroyed my fleet. After you have turned my empire against me. This is your victory." Eva shook her head. "This is not about victory. This is about showing you what you never understood." She pointed at the tablet. "You looked at our planet and saw primitive technology. You looked at our nations and saw division. You looked at our conflicts and saw weakness. But you never looked at this. You never looked at what actually makes us human." She stepped closer to him. A lone human runs into a burning building to save strangers. Why? Not because it is logical. Because something inside them says that every life matters. Every single life. She pointed at the representatives of the freed species now gathering behind the warlord. They had come from their ships. They stood together, watching. "Those species served you for hundreds of years," Eva continued. "They never rebelled because you controlled everything. Their weapons, their ships, their communications. But you could not control their hearts. And when we showed them that rebellion was possible, they remembered who they used to be." The warlord looked at the representatives. They looked back at him. No fear in their eyes anymore. "You see," Eva said, "the cost of war with humanity is not just military defeat. That is easy. Ships can be rebuilt. Soldiers can be replaced." She picked up the tablet. "The real cost is this. When you fight us, you show your own slaves that freedom is possible. You show them that even the most powerful empire can be hurt. You inspire them to remember who they were before you took everything." She held the tablet out to him again. "Take it." The warlord hesitated. Then his massive claw reached out and took the small device. "You are free to go," Eva said. "Take this back to whatever is left of your empire. Show it to your people. Let them see what humans really are." The warlord stared at her. "You are letting me live? After everything?" Eva nodded. "We are not you. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We do not kill defeated enemies. We have a different way." She turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and deliver a message to the rest of the galaxy. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not a place to invade. Tell them that if they come in peace, they will find friends. But if they come as conquerors, they will find something they cannot defeat. She smiled slightly. Tell them we are waiting. The humans left the chamber. Their small, ugly ship detached from the flagship and headed back toward the blue planet below. The warlord stood alone for a long time, holding the tablet. He looked at the images again. The paintings. The music. The stories. He thought about the firefighter. The human chain. The moon landing. The hackers and the artists and the teachers who had all become warriors when their world was threatened. He looked at the representatives of the freed species. They were leaving too. Going back to their own ships. Going back to their own worlds. Going home for the first time in hundreds of years. The Xylos Empire did not die in battle that day. It did not fall to human weapons or human ships. It crumbled from the inside. Species after species declared independence. Systems broke away. The empire that had lasted 1,000 cycles dissolved in a single cycle. And somewhere in the darkness of space, a defeated warlord floated in his damaged ship, holding a small tablet filled with human stories. He began to read. On Earth, the lights slowly came back on. City by city, country by country. The lights were brighter than before somehow. Stronger. Below those lights, 7 billion humans went back to their lives. They painted pictures and made music and told stories. They argued and disagreed and sometimes fought. But they never forgot. They had faced the darkness together and won. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species began to hear the story. They heard about the small blue planet where the people refused to lose. They heard about the firefighter and the human chain and the impossible unity. They heard the message that spread from world to world. Never invade Earth. The words appeared on the screen, simple and clear. Humanity's greatest weapon is not its ability to destroy, but its ability to unite. Never invade Earth.